Welcome back to Citizens Forum. Today I have as our guest Sharon Noble, who is the director of the Coalition to Stop Smart Meters. And Sharon has spent many hours, many days preparing a report. And I'd just like to frame what's happened firstly, just to let people know. In July 2015, Sharon lodged an official complaint with the BC Utilities Commission. Sharon charged that the new BC Hydro smart meters were not safe, and moreover that the meters had never been certified by any safety authority. Sharon provided examples of smart meter fires in BC, and these fires had put lives and property at risk. Sharon asked the BC Utilities Commission to conduct an investigation of the safety of smart meters, and if they were found to be unsafe, that a formal recall be made. Now, during this time, the BC Utilities Commission did not seek any expert opinion from electrical engineers, nor did they ask for any more information from Sharon. Rather, they put the onus on Sharon to provide to them that the BC Hydro report was flawed. Now, Sharon has responded with a comprehensive and thorough report. It showed that not only was Lynn Garris, a consultant for BC Hydro, his report was seriously flawed, but also that BC Hydro was negligent for using the Itron Smart Meters. On top of that, it appears that the BC Utilities Commission became a collaborator in this misdeed by turning a blind eye to all the damning evidence. So welcome to the show, Sharon.
Thank you, Walt.
Now, for starters, what led you to to lodge your complaint about the safety of smart meters in the first place?
When the smart meters started to be installed in 2011, I started getting emails and phone calls from people who had had some problems. They'd had appliances burn up, they'd had damages done to their home, they had major issues, and all of it sounded very strange to me. So I started doing some investigation. Many of the issues, I believe, were caused by the fact that Corix was installing smart meters using people who were not qualified. They weren't electricians, they weren't linesmen. They were people taken off the street and given minimal training. They made mistakes. Also, the meters themselves were causing some problems. Down the road, meters were burning, they were failing. And so what I tried to do is to figure out how I can get some information. I knew nothing about the system. I would contact Hydro and get no information. So I started looking around, trying to find out how do things work. So I went to the laws. First of all, the BC Safety Standards Authority has laws. For instance, it says that smart meters are supposed to be, or all electrical devices are supposed to be certified safe by CSA, except those that are used by BC Hydro. BC Hydro can certify its own equipment by using one of their engineers, unless the device is unregulated. And smart meters are unregulated. So they don't have to be certified by anybody. Nobody.
Now, that's actually a law in British Columbia or in
Yes,
Canada.
it is, under the BC Safety Standards Act. Then I started looking at some of the other things, for instance, the Fire Safety Standards Act. I found that according to that law, any fire, regardless of the size, the amount of damage, so long as there was damage to property or to life, that a fire report has to be submitted to the fire commissioner's office. It's supposed to be completed by the fire department within 3 working days. And it's supposed to be submitted immediately after it's completed.
And was that happening?
No, but that's for another story.
Okay.
Then, also, if there's any sort of suspicion by the fire department that the fire was electrical in nature, they're supposed to be getting a fire electrical inspector to the fire immediately.
Right.
And then third, nothing is supposed to be removed from the scene of a fire. Nothing, until the fire inspector has done his job. Now, that's where I started.
Okay.
So then I said, okay, the first place I'll go is the fire commissioner's office. And I started asking for fire reports. Surprisingly, despite what the law says, the fire reports are not being submitted. A high percentage of them are not being submitted at all, And many are being submitted late, maybe months, if not years down the road.
Now, is there a penalty for not submitting a fire report?
No, none at all. In fact, when I asked the fire commissioner if there is a penalty or any sort of ramification, he said no. How do we know this? How do we know that there's not a report filed? We don't know if there's a fire until the report's filed.
Yeah.
So I would go to them and say, I want the report on the fire XYZ. It happened a year ago or 8 months ago. They'd look, we don't have the report. I said, would you please request it for me? Yes. Sometimes they would eventually get it. Sometimes they wouldn't.
Now, they'll be requesting a report from the BC Safety Authority?
No, they were requesting the fire report from the fire department.
Okay.
The one that was supposed to have been completed within 3 days of the fire.
Okay.
Many of the reports would only be completed after I requested it. Some of them were completed 2 years after the fire, all depending upon their memory.
Yeah.
I wonder how accurate those are.
Yeah.
And then some of them had been completed, but never sent to the fire commissioners. So the most important thing about this fire commissioner report is that this is the basis for the fire commissioner's annual report. He uses these reports that he gets from the fire departments to report on the status of the fires in the province.
And what caused the fires and all that.
Exactly. He has basically 5 or 6 very general categories, such as smoking fires, fires that are caused by matches that are not due to smoking, internal combustion problems, heating equipment, and electrical equipment. Nothing specific to smart meters at all.
Mm-hmm.
Neither does he calculate or have any way of including any comments that are provided. So if a fire department sent in a report saying it was electrical, it started at the panel, and it's suspected that the smart meter was the problem, that wouldn't end up in the report at all. It's just ticked off as an electrical fire.
Oh, interesting.
And then this report formed the basis for BCUC's statement that there are no smart meter fires.
So that's the British Columbia Utilities Commission who relied on a report
that was prepared by Len Garris.
Yeah.
Len Garris is the fire chief for Surrey, the former head of the BC Fire Chiefs Association. He was commissioned and paid by BC Hydro to write a report about the smart meters, whether they were safe or not. He looked only at the Fire Commissioner's annual report and said because there were fewer electrical fires after the smart meters were installed than there were before the smart meters were installed, that means that there have been no smart meter fires.
Even though that in itself is quite a ridiculous assumption.
Now, logic, that's a major leap in logic. But it's also based on erroneous information.
Yeah.
It's based on the fact that perhaps as many as 30 or 40% of the fires have not been reported.
Yeah.
And no one knows it. No one knows it except me. The fire commissioner didn't know it. Len Garris didn't know it. And certainly BCUC doesn't know it. But yet that's what they're hanging their hat on.
And then the ones that are reported on, the data is so flawed for the cause of those ones that are reported.
In many instances, because it's late, or the form itself isn't very conducive for providing detailed information.
Yeah.
The information is in the comments, and those aren't included. Now, a second situation is that in many instances, there is no electrical inspector notified. Approximately 50% of the cases where I asked for an electrical inspection report from BC Safety Authority or the fire inspectors at the cities, they didn't have them. And so I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is that there were many instances where the BC Safety Authority said they couldn't make a report because the smart meter had been removed, which is against the law.
Yeah.
They said that they ruled out everything else. They knew it was an electrical fire. It started near the panel, perhaps on the outside of the house, but the smart meter had been removed and they couldn't inspect it.
Now, who would be in charge of enforcing the law that says you can't remove anything from a fire scene.
I would think that it should be the fire commissioner's department,
Yeah.
but it doesn't seem to be. Hydro denies that they've ever removed a meter from the scene of a fire before the inspector gives approval. But I've got many, many instances.
Yeah.
I've got evidence that this isn't true. And when the fire, when they can't determine the basis of the fire because the meter is gone, the fire inspector has to say, I don't know. And so, the fire report from the fire department says, undetermined, we can't say anything. So that goes into another batch that the fire commissioner doesn't count. Undetermined fire.
That's really quite remarkable situation.
Even further, Walt, when the fires are being reported by the fire commissioner, by the fire department, and the electrical inspector, the reports just get shoved in a drawer.
Yeah.
They don't talk to each other. So the BC Safety Authority might very well have some very valuable information,
Right.
but it goes nowhere.
So there's no central data bank of any sort.
No.
You
And there's
know.
no sharing of information.
So how do you see, for instance, how would the insurance providers, how do they view the situation?
That's an interesting story, too. The insurance companies have never failed to pay a claim that I know of. They will come to the person and say, don't worry, we will pay your claim.
Mm-hmm.
Many people have come to me and said, I know it was the smart meter. I saw it start at the smart meter.
Yeah.
I heard the fire department talk about it being the smart meter. And I've asked the insurance commissioner or the insurance inspector to give me a copy of the report.
Yeah.
And they'll refuse. There has never been a victim that I've known who's been able to get a copy of the report. Also, according to the law, the insurance company is supposed to submit a copy of the fire report to the fire commissioner, but I haven't been able to get a copy of it. I was told I could get a copy with Freedom of Information. I've made dozens of requests, and I've never received a report.
What would be the reason why they wouldn't provide you with a
I
report?
can only guess, but I think it's a good guess. The insurance company has told victims that they do not own the report, that the insurance company owns the report.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why that is, because the victim is paying for the report through their premium.
One would assume so.
But the insurance companies also have told the victims that they're going to be using this report to reclaim the recovery the claims from BC Hydro. Under every insurance premium, there's a subrogation clause, and that means that an insurance company can sue to recover claims that they've paid. They can sue from BC Hydro or from Itron and recover the claims.
Would they have to make that known to the original person that had the fire, that they're actually going that route, or would anybody know that that's occurring?
I don't know whether they legally are bound to tell them, but in a couple of situations, they have admitted that they're going to be suing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a rare situation. Most people don't know to ask.
Right.
But the insurance companies are not coming forward. They're not advising the people, as they would, for instance, remember with the Pinto Ford?
Yeah.
There was a problem. Insurance companies raised the issue.
Yeah.
Insurance companies should be raising this issue because there are fires that they're paying the claims for.
And that would be a line of defense for consumers if their insurance providers are saying, well, we don't like this product and we're going to cost you more, your premiums are going to cost more because you have this. You would start a process where people would be alarmed by that.
You'd think. But the insurance company is subrogating, getting recovery, but yet they're still increasing the premiums for the victims. So for the insurance company, it appears to be a win-win situation. I have been unable to document this. I've gone to the insurance commissioners. I've gone to the financial institutions, regulatory body. I can't get any information on this. So it's just a guess on my part, but it makes sense.
It does make sense. Now, the report itself is a very substantial document, and the evidence that you've submitted is a very large binder here sitting on the desk. It's a huge amount of work. It's very impressive that you've taken this much time and effort as a citizen to point out some very, very serious situations here that we have. You've pointed out several deficiencies in the system already, where the safety and the health and safety of the public is put at risk because of this lack of information. Now, did you want to talk a little bit about the smart meters themselves?
Yes.
Okay, what was said about these smart meters when you start to look into them?
Well, the smart meters themselves have many design flaws. First and foremost, they're made of plastic, combustible plastic.
Mm-hmm.
The old analogs that they're replacing were made of glass and metal.
Yeah.
And as engineers have told me, they could not burn.
Mm-hmm.
And I have asked the Hydro, I've asked the BC Utilities Commission, I've asked the Fire Commissioner, if you can tell me one time when there's been an analog fire, I would like to know. BCUC's definition of whether the smart meters are safe or more dangerous than a smart analog is if they have caused more fires than an analog. I've never been able to find an analog fire. So
Right.
by BCUC's own definition, smart meters are not safe.
Yeah.
In addition, I've spoken with many electrical engineers who've taken the smart meters apart, many who've studied them in depth, and they found many design flaws
Yeah.
that, in their opinion, make them to be fire hazards. One, beyond the fact that they're combustible,
Yeah.
is the fact that they have no surge protectors. The analogs would stop they had fuses that were associated with them, and
Yeah.
the surge would not occur. Right now, there are no surge protectors. And for instance, an example was in Summerland a couple of years ago during the winter, there was a storm, and a fire or a tree went on top of the wires, the power lines, and dozens of smart meters exploded off homes, causing fires. This has happened across North America dozens of times. Never with an analog meter, but with the smart meters,
Yeah.
yes. Another design flaw is that there's a remote disconnect switch, allowing Hydro to either turn the power on or off at the meter. It arcs, and this arcing can cause fires.
Right.
Also, there's a lithium battery that runs the smart meter to keep track of the data if there's a power outage. This lithium battery will explode if it overheats or if it gets wet.
That's something like the problem they had with lithium batteries on airplanes. Remember, they were.
Yes, they're not allowed on airplanes anymore,
Yeah.
but yet they're allowed on the side of our homes.
Yeah.
I have had so many electrical engineers provide information, and I've included a couple of them in my report,
Yeah.
and yet they are being ignored. This information is being ignored, and I hold BCUC guilty of complicity.
Yeah.
Because even though I provided this information, I provided it 2 years ago,
Yeah.
I provided it again last year, and I provided it again in this report, and they have just ignored it.
So, the Lynn Garris report, that it's quite obvious that the BC Utilities Commission relied solely on that report. And that report was paid for and commissioned by BC Hydro, the very people that...
No conflicts of interest there.
Yeah, this is a question. I mean, do you think that would, in itself, would render that report, almost useless to use because of the conflicts that are there?
You would think so. The BC Utilities Commission relied on only one source, and Lynn Garris relied only on one source. And that one source is faulty. It's incomplete. It's
Yeah.
the Fire Commissioner's annual report. But in everything they've said, when I told BCUC that the Fire Commissioner is not getting all the fire reports,
Yeah.
they said, I don't believe you. The law says fire reports have to be completed. When I said that the electrical inspection's not occurring, they said, I don't believe you. The law requires it.
Yeah.
When I said meters are being removed from the scene of fires, they said, that's against the law. It can't be happening.
Yeah.
They don't want to believe the evidence. I have 600 pages of evidence here, and I dare them to ignore it.
Well, this is what's so remarkable. I mean, the overall scenario here is that you've dissected this a situation here that we're having with our inability to actually effectively analyze whether a product is safe or not. and every agency and every government body are more or less deficient in one way or another. But there's no overall authority that's going to step up and say, "Okay, you guys, this has to stop. We're going to do something different." Is that the way it is to you?
Yes, exactly the way it is. And what's really concerning, I mean, smart meters for sure are a problem. The fire commissioner doesn't know, BC Safety Authority doesn't know, the politicians are ignoring. All of this stuff is happening. There's no central authority.
Yeah.
You have to ask, what other dangerous practices are going on?
Yeah.
Other things could be happening, and there's no central authority. There are no penalties for breaking these laws.
Well, ultimately, what ministry in the provincial government, I assume it'd be the provincial government, would have the jurisdiction to oversee all these problems? Is it one single ministry, or would it be several?
The energy minister, of course, is in charge of BC Hydro.
Yeah.
So she ultimately, Minister Mungle, is ultimately responsible for the smart meter program.
Yeah.
She inherited it. It's a mess. It needs to be investigated, but it's hers now.
Yeah.
The fire commissioner reports to the infrastructure and transportation minister, Trevina.
Yeah.
And she is ultimately responsible for the mess at the fire commissioner's office. I don't know who the BC Safety Authority is responsible to. The fire departments ultimately report, I believe, to the fire commissioner. So it would be Trevina's responsibility to make sure that the fire department is providing the reports,
Yeah.
that the fire department is involving the inspector,
Yeah.
that they are reporting and communicating with each other. I think that is the ultimate authority for the reporting. But there is no mechanism at this point to hold anybody responsible.
So, okay, where do we go from here? I mean, what can you do now? Who do you approach? What's the next step?
I wish I knew, Walt. On September 2nd, I hand-delivered this report, all 700 pages, to John Horgan's constituency office. And I mailed these binders to the BC Utilities Commission, to David Morton, who's the CEO and chair of the BCUC. I mailed it to Energy Minister Mungle. I mailed it to Minister Trevina, and and to Sonia Furstenau of the Green Party.
Yeah.
So far, I've heard from nobody.
Yeah.
Not one response in more than 2 months.
It's been 2 months since you've done that.
I also emailed every single solitary MLA.
Yeah.
And I asked them, please do your due diligence.
Yeah.
BC Hydro isn't. BC Hydro has never done its due diligence.
No.
It has allowed these dangerous things to be put on our homes. Lives and property being put at risk.
Yeah.
Somebody must care. What I'm asking for is an independent panel, the same type that is looking at Site C.
Okay.
We have to remember, Site C and the Smart Meter program were both treated under the Clean Energy Act the same way. No oversight was allowed.
Okay.
Money is being spent, a lot of money. That's for another program.
Yeah.
But costs are never ending on this program.
Yeah.
The only thing green is the money going into the corporate pocket, and no one's doing anything about it. And
Yeah.
we're getting sick, our lives and property being put at risk. And we need to have an independent panel look at all aspects of this program.
Yeah.
If I am found to be correct that these meters are fire hazards, they should be recalled. Itron has sold hydro and the BC public a defective product.
Now, who would conduct a review of that sort? Would that be the provincial government? Would it be, who would order up that?
It would be the BC government, I think, would order it. And I think on that panel should be some independent forensic experts.
Yeah.
They shouldn't just hand it off to BC Hydro
Yeah.
or anyone like that. They need to bring in forensic engineers who could look at
Yeah.
this from from the fire safety point of view. They
Yeah.
need forensic accountants to look at the accounting and the expenses. They need to look at cybersecurity experts to look at the hacking issue.
Yeah.
There are many issues, but from a fire perspective, they need a panel of experts who have absolutely no tie to BC Hydro, because you're not going to get the truth.
So it really would have to be the premier that would have to
I
decide
think so.
to make a decision of that magnitude.
Isn't he the one who ordered a Site C review?
It's correct. And he was the one that decided to send the Site C question to the BC Utilities Commission.
Yes.
And ask for a serious review.
I don't think the BC Utilities Commission is the right panel for reviewing it. They've shown themselves to be incapable of doing it.
Yeah.
They have biases. They have some conflicts of interest, apparently, that I'm not aware of. Because every time I've complained to them now for 4 years, and I keep getting the same answer from them. So I would say I would like to see an independent panel scratched from day one.
Yeah. So we should mention that you were down at the BC NDP annual convention just last weekend, and
yes,
you're outside the doors. Why were you outside the doors? Why wouldn't they allow you inside the convention?
We asked to have a table, and they refused to grant us one. Even though I hear that there were empty ones available, they wouldn't let us have one. So a bunch of us were outside handing out flyers, and I had a poster that I was holding showing a melted smart meter and a burned house, a house in Langford. And I had, the reaction was amazing.
So the general membership of the NDP, as they walked past you and responded,
very positively.
So it was very positive.
A lot of people still have their own analogs.
Yeah.
Many people are upset that the NDP is not getting involved in this, that they've allowed this to happen the way they did. Several told me they should have put up a fight day one, and they didn't. Many others are furious at the fact that it's costing so much. Very knowledgeable people. Many of them are also concerned about the radiation issue.
The health effects.
The health effects.
And that's a topic for another day, too. Yes. Setting aside all the security issues and
the fire
all
issue.
The chances of this information being hacked and the meters being hacked. And then you have this huge issue around the health issues of the radiation.
I had two tell me that they had been made sick by smart meters.
Yeah, and believe me, I've heard many people who've been made ill by being too close to smart meters. So we're going to wrap it up for today, Sharon. There's so much to talk about here, and I really hope that we can have you back in a future date. I know you must be very tired. This is a huge amount of work.
But people deserve to have this information, Walt.
Yeah.
They're not getting it any other way, and I'm so grateful that you're doing it.
So it's a pleasure, believe me. I'm so impressed by your work. I can't say thank you enough. I think it's a document that's going to live on. It's full of truth. And the fact that the government to this point has been able to ignore it is just a travesty for democracy and for what's fair and just in our society. And the fact that you've soldiered on and created this document is so impressive to me. And I think we all should, as citizens, take heart that you can actually do something here to show how the system is not working.
People should go online and read it. This report is available on our website.
Yeah.
And the report itself is only 38 pages long.
Yeah.
It's simple reading, and I think they'd find it very interesting.
Well, it's very, very compelling. And after we're done, we're going to show a clip of Vicky Lightfoot, who was at that convention. She's an NDP delegate from Penticton, and to show how she was treated when she tried to have her resolution heard.
All we wanted was we would like consideration of the independent review of it. That's all we're asking.
If the government cannot act on such compelling evidence, I mean, it goes to show just how broken our system is. If the old adage is that no matter who you vote for, the government always gets in, it seems to be a bit of a joke. But if they cannot act on this and will not take this information seriously, then it really does go right to the core of what our problems are with our democracy in Canada.
I'm very disappointed I haven't even received an acknowledgement. My theory is that they don't want to acknowledge this report, because if they do, they might have to do something.
Yeah, it's almost like too big an issue. They're feeling that they're going to step on a lot of big toes.
There's a lot of vested interest here.
A lot of interest here. And we'll be talking about more about that maybe in the future. So thank you very much, Sharon, for coming in today. So that completes our segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back, and we're going to have a little chat, Jack and I, about the events of the day. And I think, firstly, Jack, what was your impression of the evidence that Sharon had provided for us today?
You sort of had to laugh a few times, but the overriding thing to me is that the media also refuses to report on it. So we can see this, I call it a conspiracy, the government, the media, and above them the corporations who for whatever reason are doing all this to us. And it's I mean, it just shows how, how totally gone our democracy.
You talked about the shadow government, and it's a phrase that you could think about, because it seems like that there's this other force happening on all these other events, that somehow we cannot find justice and fairness, that with all these institutions and all these bureaucracies, there's this other force acting on it that we can't affect.
Yes. We've lost control of our own government, and they work against us on behalf of a small elite who run the country. And we've got to take control of our governments back. But boy, we are nowhere close to doing that. And here we're going to show a short video clip of the NDP convention as an example of it, I guess.
Yeah, and we're going to run that, just show Vicky Lightfoot's struggle with her own party, with the NDP, and how she was treated when she was trying to put a resolution forward. And I have with me today Vicky Lightfoot. Vicky has a resolution that's going to be put to the floor in regards to the use of smart meters. So, welcome, Vicky. And could you give us an outline of what your resolution's about?
Well, my resolution is asking the BC NDP government to take the smart meter program to the Utility Commission so that it can be reviewed for the cost to consumers and the viability of the program and how much it's really costing consumers.
Okay, so how have you been received here at the convention?
We've been received wonderfully. I wasn't allowed to have a table here. I was told there wasn't enough room, but I see lots of space. So this morning a bunch of us stood outside in front and we let the delegates know about our message that way. Every delegate that we met was in favor of our resolution, and we were very well received. Lots of people want to see this go to the Utility Commission. It was over $1 billion, never reviewed by the Utility Commission, and it needs to be.
Now, previously the Utility Commission actually did have a ruling on smart meters.
That's right. The Utility Commission received application for this, I think, in 2008, and they were turned down. They said the Utility Commission at the time said it wasn't in the best interest of consumers to do this program. It was too expensive and would continue to be very expensive. So Gordon Campbell brought in the Clean Energy Act and bypassed the Utility Commission, just like he did with the Site C dam as well. And so over $1 billion, we don't know how much more than $1 billion have been spent on this program with no oversight by the People's Utility Commission.
Now, as per costs for installing these smart meters per disclosure, how does that compare to other jurisdictions?
We pay twice as much as any other jurisdictions to install the meter. I'd like to know why we pay twice as much, who's profiting from that, where the profits are going to. I suspect that it's individual private contractors benefiting it, former Liberal insiders who set up companies in Richmond, got the contract to install these, and I think that that needs to be looked at as well.
The resolution that she has submitted is now looks like it's not going to be able to be discussed. So could you ask you, Vicky, what has occurred here?
Well, obviously not just our resolution, but a number of resolutions, somewhat contentious, were submitted to a panel, and the panel put things in order according to their priorities. Our resolution was not considered a priority, and it's number 27 out of 28 within an hour. It's not going to get heard.
Do you think that that's undemocratic?
I absolutely believe it's undemocratic, and motions were just made on the floor for people to ask for them to be bumped up on the agenda, and there was a big argument back and forth, and basically we lost. the committee, unbeknownst to us, what they discuss or how, determines the order of resolutions, knowing full well that those in the top 10 are going to get heard, and those in the top 20 might get heard, and those after number 20 will definitely not get heard. So our resolution asking the BC NDP government to send the smart meter debacle to the Utility Commission, like it should have been, over $1 billion spent of our money, it should have been the oversight of our utility company.
One would think that since they sent the Site C dam to the BC Utilities Commission, that they would be more prone to also send this issue to the Commission.
Absolutely, and it's interesting, in opposition, Adrian Dix said that, you can quote him, he said that this should be have oversight and accountability, and it needs to be looked at. So in opposition they understood, but in government it's a whole different story. Not too sure why. That's something you'll have to ask Adrian Dix about, or John Horgan, or Michelle Mangal, the new Minister for Energy.
So on that note, folks, we're going to wrap up the show this week, and we'll see you next week.